Episode 3 starts with the title of The Beginning, so we're going back to pre-war. We're going back to the cowboy guy that we saw in the first couple of minutes of episode 1, you know, the one that's been a ghoul in these episodes. He's a cowboy movie star, and they're filming a scene in which he is supposed to kill a bad guy in his cowboy movie, but stops the shoot because he doesn't feel right because it goes against his character. There's a whole kerfuffle about how it's a commie cowboy, so you're supposed to kill him, and they fired a studio executive who was a communist.
Commencing tactical assessment. Red Chinese with detected. Democracy is truth. Communism is death.
We flip back to the present, meaning dystopia. The ghoul is standing there looking at the headless corpse of the science guy. You remember that? The science guy who had his head rippered off by the Fallout's female Lucy lady. We get a scene of the ghoul coughing and having to hit something on an inhaler. I didn't recognize any of this from the games whatsoever. Now, there is a drug that you can take in the game that is done with an inhaler called Jet, but that is basically like meth, speed, amphetamines. In the game, this is something that ghouls might have enjoyed, but it certainly wasn't something that was needed for them to exist. We then get a scene that I was troubled by because I have played these games for, 10, 15 years, starting with Fallout 3, New Vegas, Fallout 4, of the ghoul with the dog meat stand-in, assuming the pose that the Lone Wanderer always did in the Fallout games. It's an iconic scene. And they give it to a ghoul. We jump to Fallout is female Lucy lady. She's carrying a head through the desert. Fantastic visuals. Got to give credit for that. The show is beautiful. Of course, she makes another fire at night because why not? You're only in a nuclear apocalypse with cannibal raiders, but hey, I guess the show wanted the atmospherics. We then get a scene where she's pressing something on the head of the dead science guy. It doesn't look particularly fresh. And then she seems to shove a tracker up the severed human head's nose that she's carrying. Back to everybody's favorite well-developed character in the Fallout series, the Black Squire. He's using an armor frame straight out of Fallout 4 to fix his stolen power gear. We get to hear the Brotherhood of Steel calling for the night. You remember the Michael Rappaport guy who this guy, the Squire, let die and then stole his power armor. Well, the Brotherhood base is calling and wondering what the hell is going on. Now, what does this fine Brotherhood of Steel Esquire do? He lies to the Brotherhood of Steel, pretends to be the knight that is dead. He then says that he himself died and not the knight. Unwittingly, he triggers the Brotherhood of Steel to send out a replacement Esquire. Now that makes him freak out. We then see that he's back in the same town that the ghoul shot up in the previous episode. He needs to get a part fixed. We get some member berries of caps that are used to pay for things in the Fallout universe. After he comes back from getting a meaningless part fixed, there are, raiders, town trash, messing around with the power armor he left on the frame, and you know where this is going. He manages to beat the shit out of a couple of them and then gets pinned by the rest, who are continuing to kick the shit out of him, but manages to get one of his arms in the suit and then uses the power-assisted hand to literally crush, like an egg, one of the raiders' heads. As this happens, a Brotherhood of Steel Whirlybird shows up. Well, that was a quick replacement. Black guy gets back into the power armor to hide who he is, and his plan appears to be, because remember, again, the character that the writers have created for this African-American squire, what a great character. Why should we care about him? As a matter of fact, he's such a sociopath, he seems to delight in terrifying and causing the new squire to cry. It's called a sociopath. While all this is happening, the clerics call in from the Brotherhood of Steel, that would be the leadership, and give him a new mission to, yes, that's right, chase the MacGuffin of the science guy, who now exists only as the form of a severed human head, which, again, Fallout is female Lucy has, who the ghoul is also after. Like virtually every episode of the show, it is quite beautiful. I didn't find a lot of jarring disconnects in this episode as far as out of place artifacts, things that look too shiny like I did in episode 2, so that's a big thumbs up. We go back to Fallout as female Lucy. She finds flooded ruins of a small town. She comes across a cute fawn and feeds it grass, and this is probably one of the most obvious setups ever, because holy shit, a big monster jumps out of the lake and devours the little baby deer. But it's not done. It comes back and attacks the Fallout as female Lucy lady, and the only thing that it manages to get is, yes, you guessed it, the severed head of the scientist that she was carrying in her backpack. Now, as she's laying there wondering what she's going to do, her Pip-Boy starts going off for high radiation, and who shows up? Yes, you guessed it, the ghoul cowboy guy. He has a shotgun to her head, knocks her out with it, tells her he wants the head. There are some truly beautiful scenes of the apocalypse of this dystopian landscape. I've got to be fair, the show does a really good job when it takes its time showing the world of Fallout. But the story takes us back to Vault 33. Now, we've got the cousin that the Fallout as female Lucy chick was having sex with. He apparently got in trouble for letting her out and has been reassigned. I don't know why we need to care. Lucy's weird brother goes before the Vault Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee that rags him out for letting out his sister along with the other dude. He apparently has an attitude problem. He threatens the committee. We then find out that the raiders that murdered a whole bunch of people in Vault 33 are in the Vault jail, and Lucy's brother has been given a new job delivering them food. Back to the black guy squire that nobody cares about with his new squire. Both of them are idiots. Why? Because men are either stupid or evil. Black guy in the power armor is still enjoying torturing his new squire. Continues to not make a good case for anybody to give a shit about him. Then they make up some bullshit about using the radiation track of the ghoul cowboy to be able to follow him, which it's not in the game, and not only that, but it makes no goddamn sense in this story. You're surrounded by radiation. Back to the Fallout as female Lady Lucy. She's tied up with an anchor around her neck and being used as bait by the cowboy ghoul guy. She's thrashing around, partially drowning in the submerged ruins that we saw earlier. This attracts the monster, and I still don't know what the hell this monster is. The monster starts to swallow her whole in a scene very reminiscent of Jaws when Quint was on the Orca, except without any emotional impact whatsoever. Lucy grabs the ghoul's saddlebags and uses it to beat the monster off. Now, using those saddlebags, Lucy has apparently destroyed whatever inhaling vile stuff the cowboy ghoul guy needs to not turn feral, which, again, is not from the games at all, but okay. And we go back to the sociopath torture his squire in his stolen power armor. This is not a Brotherhood of Steel squire black guy. He's continuing to wander around in the power armor, and it really hit me. How? Those of you who played Fallout 3, Fallout 4 know that those power suits are powered by a fusion core. It's like a nuclear battery, because that armor takes a lot of energy to do what it needs to do. But apparently in this show, infinite. It can just run forever for some reason. Don't ask questions. We get a narrative about the squire being a shitter at the fly factory because bugs are full of protein. I'm sure that's totally not a globalist message insert, and that this is totally not part of subliminal programming by Amazon, along with a whole lot of other messages in this series. And then the new idiot white squire, who the black sociopath, not actual person who'd be in the Brotherhood of Steel, gives permission to the black guy to be an asshole because it's everybody else's fault. Did you guys catch that if you watched this episode? The sociopath gets a sympathetic backstory because apparently everybody at the Brotherhood of Steel used to beat the shit out of him during training. Never mind that the white guy also got the shit kicked out of him in the Brotherhood of Steel for some reason. Again, this show, men are either stupid or evil. Any type of patriarchal organization with a command structure based upon meritocracy, this show seems to want to shit on. We go back again to the vault. It's a lot. It is a lot. The pacing in this episode, it feels like a whole lot of filler. Not a lot of story to fill up all the screen time that they need to. Lucy's brother, apparently his name is Norm. They're talking about the raiders in the jail. What should they do with them? The same DEI-looking idiot committee that we talked to earlier is sitting there talking about what to do with the prisoners, that maybe we can get them to share our values. There's a conversation that's painfully pseudo-intellectual, like I imagine the current state of American universities to be. The DEI committee thinks that if they just try hard enough, the raiders could join the vault. Again, none of this would happen within the game. It goes back to when these idiots let the raiders in the vault. This would never happen. We get more Portlandia humor. Lucy's brother Norm doesn't want to help the prisoners. He wants to execute them, which I fully agree with. I would have shot these assholes in the head and thrown them outside. But don't worry, now there's a water chip issue for the vault. What does that mean? That means they only have enough clean water in the vault to stay there for 2 months. Maybe longer if they execute the asshole raiders. We go back to the hot blonde pregnant woman who got stabbed in the eye. She happens to agree with Lucy's brother Norm. Shoot the raiders. And the pacing is absolute shit. Back to the black guy in the power armor with his white scribe, who, again, we got the sympathetic backstory for. They stumble across the same lake that Lucy was just at with the ghoul guy. The same monster attacks them, and then the monster starts to eat the squire. Again, we get more of the Jaws vibe where it looks like Quint from Orca. The scene tries way too hard to be funny, with the black guy in the power armor suit trying to pull the squire out of the monster's mouth. As it turns out, the monster pukes him up along with, ding, you guessed it, the missing head of the science guy. That's the MacGuffin. And now, black guy in power armor with his idiot white squire have the head. That brings us back to the ghoul and Lucy, who won't give her water. They're wandering through a total desert area, through lots of beautiful ruins. It looks beautiful. Gotta give points for that. They go to a high radiation area, and we see the ghoul guy get mad when he sees a jarringly intact and not faded billboard for Vault Tech with a Pip-Boy guy on it. We go back to pre-war, the same type of setting we saw in the beginning of this episode, and there is the not ghoul yet guy. His name is Howard, and he apparently, because he's a Hollywood actor, has been cast to do a Vault Tech commercial. Now they're shooting all kinds of publicity stills, and it turns out that Howard is the guy who came up with the thumbs up, the iconic Pip-Boy thumbs up look. And the episode ends. Out of all of them so far, this was probably the worst paced. The story, what there was of it, was stretched way too far to try and fill up this time slot. Beautifully shot, kind of cringy action sequences. The humor in some cases landed. I did get a couple of chuckles. Every time we go back to the vault, I want to scream and throw shit at my TV. The Portlandia humor stuff, it makes my skin crawl. It's important to note that this concludes the oversight of Jonathan Nolan over the Fallout series. Now, spoiler alert, I have already watched episode 4. Now, I'm going to say this. I don't know how this can be the same show. The pacing and the writing and the story pick up vastly in episode 4. Thus, I'm going to go ahead and do a episode 4 through the end of the show holistic, inclusive review instead of doing episode by episode reviews. It's really obvious to me why Amazon decided to move up the release date from April 12th through April 10th. They knew that anybody sitting down and watching this show, just with episode 1, episode 2 drops every week, probably would have not tuned in to get to what I'm starting to see to be a much better part. I'm not ready to call it good yet, but way better than the first 3 episodes of this show. What do you think? Tell me in the comments section below. What did you think about the show so far through 3 episodes? I did a live show with Wakazashi's Tea House. I'm going to go ahead and put the link in that in the description below. If you somehow made it this far into my video, I am Salty Traveling C. You have a good one.